So today's TED Talk is if Hell Let Loose was historically accurate. So we'll be talking specifically about armoured vehicles today. Get away. We'll be talking about armoured vehicles today and what should be on the maps rather than what is on the maps. So we'll start off with Normandy. Of course, we all know Normandy. It's the place in France that I just played. So for the Americans, we have the M8 Greyhound, which is correct. The M5A1 Stuart, which is also historically correct. The M4A1 76W, this is not a 75 tank that they have in the game. It's actually a 76, which they should have. And that should be on the map, yes, on those Normandy maps, not a problem. Not Hill 400, well, they probably had them then, but that's later on, Belgium and Germany. But yeah, the M4A1 76W. This is an M4A1 75. Notice the shorter barrel. That's a 76. That's a 75. Now, the one you see in the game, if you didn't know, that is an M4A2 76W. W stands for wet stowage. Basically, all the ammunition is stowed down here, and it's a water glycol mix that prevents the rounds exploding. Early on, they used to call them Tommy Cookers or Ronsons because they light first time every time. But it's apocryphal that those things, whether they said them at the time, but yeah, they used to burn up. And that was mainly because of the way the rounds were stored. They were stored projectile down, so the cartridge case was up. So any manifestation of horrific and hot metal landing on the cartridge case would tend to ignite the cartridge or the primers, and once that happens, it's gone. So you put in wet storage and then or stowage, and then it doesn't do so much. It might let off one round, but it won't let off them all. Now, the M4A3E2 Jumbo. Now, funnily enough, yes, it was on Normandy maps. This one's modelled as the Cobra King, which was first in Bastogne. It actually wasn't the first in Bastogne. It was the first from Patton's command that got into Bastogne. There was a tank command there, and they did have tanks at Bastogne. The SDK have said 234/2 Puma, 50mm gun, excellent weapon, 8 wheel, 8 rad as the Germans call them. Very historically accurate. And if you didn't know, both the scout cars can carry an extra 2 crew, which is supposed to be the spotters, but people don't use them properly in there. And of course there's the recon photos that never get used by people because they don't know about them. There's no tutorial. The Panzerkampfwagen 2 Ausführung L, the looks or Lynx in English, is is all probably about the same amount produced as the Pumas, but they're a light tank, 20mm cannon. Unfortunately, the developers don't give us AP ammo that they should have, because then they might be able to deal with greyhounds, etc., instead of flipping off hundreds of rounds of HE like a gnome on heat or something. Sorry, no offence to gnomes. What should be on the map, or should be on the Normandy maps for the Germans, is the Sturmgeschütz 3 Ausführung G. This is based on the Panzerkampfwagen 3 chassis, 6 road wheels. Has a MG shield, usually an MG34 75mm gun. Very deadly, very dangerous, very tough to kill frontally, not so much sides and rear. The other one is the Sturmgeschütz 4 Ausführung G. This one has notably 8-ray wheels. Also has what people have termed the sour cough. The Germans never called it a sour cough. This is the Gun Mantle here. And this is a late production model. Has the 360 degree MG34 operated internally. So you can see that if that was in the game and it was like, let's say for example, the 2-player, you'd have the driver gunner, a driver moving that can traverse the tank left and right, etc. And then he switches over to the gun sight and he can aim about 10 degrees left and right. There's a little difference in the angles, but 10 degrees left and right is when he's aiming. But if he needs to make a massive swing, he needs to go to the driver position and then he can't shoot the gun. The commander can be up here with his little cupola and he can operate the 360 MG34, making this very nasty to try and fight because you get shot from behind unless you're below the height of the engine at the rear. The Germans also used in France, in Normandy particularly, the pre-war French Renault R28, which was a light tank, not very good. The Americans did encounter them at Saint-Mary-Glisse and also Saint-Marie-du-Mont, and they only had 2 bazookas and they quite happily destroyed those. They're what the Germans called Butte Panzer, which is basically foreign Panzer. They also had the Hospice H35, which is another light tank. Better gun, but nothing capable of destroying a Sherman. Certainly capable of going up against a Stewart or a Greyhound. These are also quite slow. 2-man crew, 1-man command, 1-man turret, and a driver. That's it. 2-man crew. So, and these are some of those I've shown on previous TED Talks that were destroyed by the paratroopers. These are R28s that the German Panzer Training Unit number 100 used. Soviet tanks. Let's get into those now. This is historical. It's not for balance or anything else like that. We have the BA-10, which the Soviets did use at Kursk and at Stalingrad. That machine gun there should actually operate, but it doesn't for some reason. It would make it a bit better because the thing's fairly lightly armoured and not particularly good. What isn't in the game is the T-70, which has had a 45 caliber gun. It was used at Kursk and at Stalingrad, and it was a light tank. They tend to get knocked out by all sorts of things, including anti-tank rifles. The next one, of course, that's in game, is the T-34/76 1942. 1942 being designated due to the shape of the turret and also the fuel tanks at the rear. They're fuel tanks, not stowage. They did later on put the fuel tanks on the side in circular drums, and that should be on the map. Also, the Soviets on both Kursk and Stalingrad should have the KV one, not the IS one. They were never there at both locations. And they're going to say, oh, but, balance. No, history says this is what should be there. The Soviets used them. And the Soviets used mass tactics. They didn't go with the German technological superiority of accuracy and range. So there's two differences. They just pile on and keep going. Of course, as the Soviets would say, the quantity is its own quality. The Germans at Stalingrad and Kursk should have this version, the Panzerkampfwagen Ausführung F, same gun as the Lux, and a coaxial machine gun, crew of 3. Very effective, especially against infantry. You don't use them against tanks. They also had the Panzer SDK have said 231, 232, this is the 232. Same gun as the Panzer, the Panzer II Ausführung L. That's a command variant with the radio antenna, and basically the same as a 234/2. The Panzerkampfwagen 4 Ausführung G is a tank that was used at Kursk, and you can see it here on the Kursk map. Although it wasn't painted in this colour, it should actually be of course by February 43 all the tanks were painted, armoured vehicles I show were painted base coat dunkel gelb or yellow, and then overpainted with either olive green or red brown. The Panther was at Kursk only, was never at Stalingrad, but not the G model, it was the D models. And so in production it was the D model first, then the A model, then the G model. Of course there was an experimental F model with a small term or a small turret. Tiger was of course at Kursk only. It's where it did its massed fighting, and of course this is a tank that is camouflaged correctly in the paint scheme for 1943. Basically what they did was they overpainted the dunkel gelb over the green that it was, and left the stripes on it. Of course Panzer Lehr wasn't there. It was a tank training battalion, or division I should say, which we've discussed previously. The Stug 3 of course was there, as well as the Stug 4, but not so many of them. 4 is the only other map I'll mention tonight, and is anybody going to guess what tank I'm going to reveal? Anybody at all? Here we are. It's the King Tiger, which should be at Foy because they were there. Now, how did the Americans beat them? Well, they ran out of fuel, plus their crews were inexperienced. And once your tank's out of fuel, it's a mission kill. It can't move, and so it's dead.